I want to take some time today to talk about Bethesda because it's one thing for a development company to make mistakes but then learn from them. And then it's another to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again with little consideration and regard for the fact that you're shipping a product to paying customers who, deserve a certain level of quality standards. And that's an area where Bethesda, especially in the last couple months and years, has continuously failed at. And so today I'm going to talk about just the general outlook of Bethesda and what they've released recently, what's coming, anywhere from, the Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition that proved to be a disaster as far as launches are concerned, the new content for Fallout 76 Burning Springs that also had a rough launch. We're going to talk about the current state of Starfield and how grim that outlook is, how Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion has kind of faded into obscurity, and just how long we'll be waiting for Elder Scrolls 6. And what all this indicates, in my opinion, is this consistent pattern of disregard for the consumers, for the players, where they're willing to compromise on quality, knowing that currently they're too big to fail, that people will buy the stuff anyway, regardless of what state they ship stuff in. Or there's just a certain amount of mismanagement or a certain amount of just limitations with the technology that they're using, whatever it is, that's leading to consistent failed launches. And it's getting to a point now where it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, let's begin with Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition. I've briefly touched upon this before, but since its launch, criticism has been pretty widespread. Even during its marketing campaign, the reveal trailer, people couldn't believe that they're re-releasing Fallout 4 again. And so this garnered, tons of dislikes in comparison to the amount of likes. But then the product actually came out and just broke more things than it actually fixed, which is why posts like this, where people change the everyone liked that post from Xbox to everyone hated that, garnered virality here. Here's the original post from Xbox that tried to hype up Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition until people actually checked it out. And the reception was incredibly poor. On top of the fact that they've complicated buying Fallout 4, now you're requiring like a chart to figure out what editions will get you what. There's also the price point of this thing. Keep in mind that this is a decade-old game that with this re-release, they're charging $60 for, $40 to upgrade, $40 to upgrade if you own the base Fallout 4, and $20 if you own Fallout 4 and all of the expansions and just want the Creations bundle, which is a stark contrast from, say, Skyrim Anniversary Edition's upgrade costing $20, so it's twice the cost of that, with Skyrim Anniversary Edition arguably having just more substantial Creation Club items that made that expansion a little more worthwhile. And it'd be one thing if this Anniversary Edition offered a lot more than it does, if it was just a little more feature complete, if it fixed a lot of genuine issues and overall improved the experience. But what ultimately happened was that the patch notes here reveal that they're ultimately fixing issues that they introduced with an old update, the next-gen update. There's also the fact that the Anniversary Edition introduced new bugs as well as issues with DLCs and mods that were not previously present and ultimately just broke a lot of people's experiences with the game. Plenty of people just felt that Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition was just a massive ripoff, not just in terms of its base cost, but also the kind of product that ultimately shipped, a broken mess. Now, speaking of ripoffs, you know what helps prevent being ripped off? The sponsor of today's video, Privacy, a company dedicated to safeguarding your financial life. What Privacy allows you to do is create unique virtual card numbers for individual purchases, websites, or businesses. Think of them as like burner phones, but for payment cards. Privacy's virtual cards hide the details of your real cards and your bank details to keep that information safe from data breaches and nefarious actors. As someone who's had cyber attacks against companies lead to data breaches that compromised and leaked my personal information like debit or credit card numbers, a service like this feels godsend. So you can, for example, set up single-use virtual cards that immediately close after one purchase or after one day. Great for websites that you may not feel are entirely trustworthy. Or you can create merchant-locked virtual cards that only work with the assigned vendor. Great for subscription services as well as recurring bills and utilities or any merchants from which you purchase frequently. Then you've got category-locked virtual cards that only spend on specific categories like, say, wellness and health, groceries and whatnot, which helps with budgeting. And finally, you can create everywhere cards that are universally compatible, work with payment apps like Apple Pay or Google Pay, and can be used across multiple merchants. So yeah, plenty of options to safeguard and organize your expenditures. Privacy's virtual cards also give you a ton of fine control, allowing you to do things like pause payments or set spending limits to avoid being surprised by unexpected renewals, charges, and hidden fees. And with their dedication to protecting you from fraud and shady merchants, Privacy does not sell your data. If financial privacy and protection is a priority for you, you can go to privacy.com/yongye to try their free plan with no transaction fees for domestic purchases, as well as a $5 sign-up bonus that can be used on your first purchase. So again, go to privacy.com/yongye or click the link in the description and make privacy part of your daily routine. Yeah, to really spotlight how piss poor Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition launched, I mean, you've got plenty of posts online of people reporting issues like the interface and user experience of the creations and mods here just being completely broken, not showing preview images, not working at all, and not being able to complete operations at launch. Then there's the fact that for some, despite upgrading to this Anniversary Edition or getting components separately like the new Creations bundle, they just weren't seeing that content appear in-game, and so Bethesda had a post that they're investigating an issue affecting the delivery of Creations Club content after purchasing the Creations bundle or Anniversary Edition. There's the fact that we're seeing clips like this going viral online of people having a rough time getting this thing stabilized on a technical level, seeing all kinds of visual issues and then crashes that have made this experience less than ideal. And the general consensus is that Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition just breaks more than it adds, and they are eventually introducing additional storage space for mods, and that will likely be among the more substantial quality of life improvements of the console experience in particular. But given that every Bethesda launch of anything, whether it's small or big updates, has ultimately led to something getting broken, a lot of people are fearing that the launch of this feature will ultimately break some things. A lot of people have already been told that they have to save their mods load order to ensure that this update doesn't break that aspect. So we'll see how that goes. But with Bethesda releases, it's always like a coin toss that favors the side of technical brokenness. For example, like this situation right here, all of my DLCs got deleted and the option to install them again simply doesn't exist at all, thanks to this Anniversary Edition update. That is something that's being reported by multiple users. And even some of the creations themselves from the Creation Bundle do not work properly. So, for example, the Bunker Home Pack is among them. It basically gives you like this new bunker-esque home, except it's lacking certain features like a map marker that allows you to fast travel to it. That's something that Bethesda seemingly forgot to add to this particular content. And then there's other broken elements like how people are having trouble building stuff within this home for some reason, or how, you know, the doors in this home are named Test Cell rather than their appropriate names like June's Bunker, Juniper Cove Resort, Wilmington Estates, and Vault-Tec Showcase. Instead, Quick Test Cell is the name they'll see on the doors. So it just highlights that this content is broken and incomplete. And sure, over time, some of this stuff will get fixed or has already been fixed with hot fixes and the like. But this being a consistent pattern, this being something that Bethesda still hasn't learned from since the good old days, is truly showing a complete disregard for the fact that, you know, this is a monetary transaction where certain bars have to be met. People excuse this stuff once upon a time because once upon a time, Bethesda was at the forefront of these kinds of open world RPGs. But the industry has evolved a lot since, and we have seen other developers tackle that genre and in many ways do it better and release a more polished product. Bethesda's foothold in this particular landscape, this particular genre, is very quickly loosening, and in order for them to show that they're able to keep up with competition, they have to do better, at the very least, ensure that their technical stuff is just in order, that their launches at the very least go well and doesn't result in these kinds of like game-breaking situations, especially when we're talking about old games where updates should enhance the experience, not regress it technically in many areas. And then there's Fallout 76, which, I mean, we all know about the incredibly rough launch that it had. I covered all of that. And while the post-launch has seen significant improvements for the game, there are also persistent issues like the fact that launches of new content updates tend to just also launch broken and require time for that stuff to be fixed or, you know, don't get fixed at all. So, for example, recently Fallout 76 saw the launch of the Burning Springs update that features none other than the ghoul from the Amazon Fallout show, except immediately after launch, what people experienced was servers crashing. Bethesda's had to put out multiple social media posts expressing that they're aware of the issue, that they're on it, and I think it took like a day or two for this stuff to come back online, which is unacceptable for the launch of a brand new massive update that's going to see an influx and flood of players. It meant that for a lot of people, while the Burning Springs update went live, they technically couldn't play it until, 1 or 2 days later. The game was literally inaccessible and unplayable throughout all of that time where servers were shut down. So technically, the game launched like 1 or 2 days late. And the thing is, Fallout 76 does have like test servers to ensure situations like these don't occur, but I don't know. I just don't know what's going on behind the scenes that is consistently allowing for these kinds of situations to happen. People have also been reporting issues like how certain enemies are either not spawning properly or despawning in the middle of gameplay. And what that means is that you cannot loot their corpses, and this game being all about looting and upgrading your equipment and the like, that is a major problem. And then there's the removal of features like caravans, which was part of this additional content called Milepost Zero, which is being shut down with the next update, as reported here, 3 months ago prior to the release of the Burning Springs. And this has been something that's been very consistent with Fallout 76, where developers will pour a lot into new feature and content additions, only for that to essentially, almost akin to Destiny, get vaulted, essentially. So, scrolling down through here, you'll find folks listing out plenty of other elements of the game that, developers put a lot of work into that ultimately were completely removed from the game, like Nuclear Winter, Vault 94 Raid, Survival Servers, Mischief Night, so on and so forth. This kind of removal of content just diminishes the value of Fallout 76, and it gives players less things to do in a game that many agree, while has content, the amount of content isn't so substantial that it justifies the removal of these major elements. I don't know if this is like a cost-saving measure, if it has anything to do with the amount of load that this content places upon servers, and they're not seeing enough engagement and monetization to justify maintaining these features and the additional costs that may involve. I don't know if it's something to do with that, but either way, for players, it is discouraging to see that an activity that they may be heavily invested in can be removed just by Bethesda's whim at any point in time, just randomly. So yeah, Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition, Fallout 76, all of these have been going through rough patches. And then we have Starfield, Bethesda Game Studios' latest single-player release, which should be their bread and butter, but with Starfield in particular, they tried something new, kind of a space-focused version of an open-world Bethesda game, except that very design decision led to a fragmenting of the open world exploration formula that Bethesda is known for, that has led to Starfield just not resonating with a lot of people. Its exploration in particular, it was completely mishandled. And so Starfield, just from a critical reception standpoint, just isn't up there with other past Bethesda single-player experiences. And the diminishing of the player base has been substantial and something that Starfield has never been able to recover from. It's now to a point where 24-hour peaks are in, the low 4 digits, 4,255 24-hour peak players. And right now, 2,600 players are playing. A stark contrast from Bethesda's much older titles like Skyrim, for example, which came out back in 2011, is still seeing 24-hour peaks of almost 37,000 players. Even right now, 25,757 players are engaging with the game, which is 10 times more, almost 10 times more, 9 to 10 times more than what Starfield is seeing in terms of player numbers. Even Fallout 4 is seeing significantly more players than Starfield, the most recent Bethesda game. And this is a decade-old game with a 24-hour peak of over 22,000 players. And even right now, we've got over 15,000 players engaging with the game. Fallout 76, despite its qualms, it's seeing 24-hour peaks of, 17,732 players, with 13,000 players playing right now, especially with the launch of the, the Burning Springs additional content and major update that has caused a slight uptick in players. The only recent release that's doing worse than Starfield is Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered, which you can see right here has 24-hour peaks of 3,800 players. And right now we've got, 2,177 players checking this game out, significantly less than the Starfield numbers here, though not by much. And with Oblivion Remastered in particular, while this is among the more celebrated of recent Bethesda game releases, I think there was a general expectation that Oblivion Remastered would have long legs, that the modding scene would be really alive, and that this game would garner a similar level of kind of long-run, long-haul engagement that Skyrim and Fallout 4 have seen. But instead, Oblivion Remastered has been plagued by technical issues like consistent stutters that has yet to be fixed. The modding scene is not particularly alive here. I think it has in large part to do with the complications that Oblivion Remastered brings in terms of mods, because underneath the Unreal Engine 5 graphics overhaul layer is ultimately still the old Gamebryo engine that lies at the core of the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, Exoskeleton, and Experience. At its core, it's still that very old game from many, many years ago that doesn't make for the best modding kind of environment. And so I think people are just deciding to stick with the more modern Skyrim rather than go back to this Oblivion remastered that also has broken some mods because of some of the changes that they made to the game and its guts. So look, I don't think that Bethesda is running out of business anytime soon. They still retain enough of a player base across many of their games. Their games still sell well enough, and they're pulling in enough money from all of their different projects, including, their mobile games like that Fallout Shelter game, that I don't think they'll struggle to keep the lights on, especially with Microsoft's backing and Xbox's support there. But the name Bethesda no longer holds the same pedigree and stature that it once did. Now Bethesda has a lot of negative associations when people look at that logo of, oh boy, how is this launch going to be marred by technical issues? There's a certain level of trust that has been lost because just about every single Bethesda release seems to have some kind of major technical issue, and it feels like Bethesda repeats mistakes over and over and over again, and they continue to re-release things and only continue to break things even further rather than genuinely fix things or give people enough value to justify the re-releases with additional content and features that make these re-releases actually feel substantial rather than a quick cash grab before they launch their next big title, which is many, many years away. That being, of course, Elder Scrolls 6. That is Bethesda's next big title, and Elder Scrolls 6 has always been Bethesda's bread and butter, so people are really keeping their fingers crossed that Elder Scrolls 6 will break the current curse and negative role that Bethesda has been on, but even faith surrounding that isn't anywhere as confident as it used to be with past anticipations for Bethesda releases. And not to mention that we have still a while to go before Bethesda releases Elder Scrolls 6. So right here we have an interview where Todd Howard was asked, what do you think will come out first, GTA 6 or Elder Scrolls 6? Here's what Todd Howard had to say on that front.
Do you think releases sooner? Is it GTA 6? Is it the Elder Scrolls 6? Or is it Fallout 5?
I got my fingers crossed for GTA 6.
Yeah, do you think it will really come next year?
I do.
So yeah, Grand Theft Auto 6 currently has a release date of November 19th, 2026. Todd Howard believes that Elder Scrolls 6 will come out after GTA 6, assuming that release date for GTA 6 holds and it doesn't get delayed again, which means that Elder Scrolls 6 is likely coming out, at the earliest in 2027. So yeah, that's a long wait for Elder Scrolls 6, and between that time, Bethesda will likely want to fill out their schedule with things to release, or in their scenario, re-release. And I feel like because it takes so long for them to release games between each release, they're forced to release something that shows that, that financially that they're a benefit to their overlords like Microsoft and Xbox. And that'd be fine if those releases and re-releases felt substantial and they put a lot of love and care into it. But it just feels like they do the bare minimum and then spit it out for people to pay money for. And the level of disregard for, at the very least, launching products in a technically sound state, just on a basic level, having it function at launch, the fact that they still struggle with that means that confidence surrounding Elder Scrolls 6 is not as high as it could have been had Bethesda been on a positive roll with their launches and releases and engage in more consumer-friendly practices. Now look, Elder Scrolls 6, no matter what, it's going to be one of the most hyped games ever. Once they reveal that title and show some gameplay, I have no doubt that it will look really good and that people will be genuinely really excited to finally see the next big entry in this beloved, storied series. I have no doubt that Bethesda will make a lot of money for themselves and for Microsoft and Xbox when Elder Scrolls 6 launches. That's going to sell really well no matter what. But if Bethesda wants their name to carry the same level of hype and trust that now, the likes of Larian do at this point, or even CD Projekt Red, despite the big error that they made with the launch of Cyberpunk 2077, the recovery that they made with substantial and really consumer-friendly and focused updates and releases and expansions and whatnot that won them their reputation back. If Bethesda wants to achieve that level of praise and that level of their brand, meaning instant, looking forward to something rather than being cautiously optimistic about something, they just got to do better, man. The issues surrounding Bethesda releases are so repetitive and so long-running, and it feels like they're so comfortable in that it's just a little unnerving to imagine how Bethesda thinks about consumers and customers when they aren't able to rectify their mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. We all do it. But if you keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again, eventually it becomes a negligence and it always becomes intentional. Once upon a time, I would look forward to their games with like no hesitation. And now every game just has me go like, what's the catch? Like, what's the other, when is the other shoe going to drop? And it sucks to think about them this way because Bethesda games hold such a special place in my heart. It's a matter of leadership taking that initiative. And I don't know if they plan to do that anytime soon, but I hope they do. But until then, it's just, this is unacceptable. Just how many times Bethesda releases have led to these kinds of disastrous situations that are more detrimental to the folks engaging with their products than beneficial. But that's just me, and that's one man's take. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on the current state of Bethesda and what they need to do to, win back the crowd, if you will, or to go back to their golden glory days. What are the top things that Bethesda needs to overhaul or needs to change in the way of doing things to pave the road towards a brighter future? Or do you think that Bethesda is doing just fine as they are? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.